serious redditors who suddenly came into a lot of money. What was your horror story of people begging for money? I once took second in a poker tournament and won $150k. There was an audience of about 200 people when it finished. Common practice was PPL ask winners for a lucky chip. I was almost mobbed by people begging for lucky chips as I left the casino. Had to be escorted by security and paid a friend $300 to follow me in their car, and we drove all over town for 2 hours to make sure nobody was following me home. So I wouldn't consider it a lot of money, but I won $5,000 on a scratch off that was given to me on my birthday by my aunt. It was just a $2 scratcher and obviously nobody thought I would win that much. I scratched it in front of everyone, and they were all super excited for me, except my aunt who demanded the ticket back because she paid for it. I even offered to split half with her. Long story short, she took me to small claims where the judge pretty much laughed, and she didn't get chewed. Haven't talked to her since. I unexpectedly inherited about 4 years worth of take-home pay. Before I knew how much it would be, I told my best friend I'd be getting a few $1,000s. She immediately asked me to take her on a trip to Europe. That was the biggest thing she asked for, but she made other small requests as well. When the money came through, and it was a lot more than I'd anticipated, I did not tell my friend. Instead, I started distancing myself from her. I also did not tell any of my other friends. I did tell my boyfriend. He did not ask for anything. I took him on a trip to Europe. Edit. Wow, my first gold. My grandma died a week before Christmas, and she left her house and 1/4 of her small fortune to me. The rest of the money went to my brother and my 2 cousins. My uncles and aunts have been a pain in my back ever since, claiming that the money/house Arthur's, etc. And I've also been approached by people who I haven't seen nor talked in a while. Even my ex who dumped me for some douchebag rugby player started talking to me again and inviting me to places, and she's still dating the same guy. Anyway, I'm not naive enough to lend those people money or befriend ever. Luckily I have good friends and my brother as advisors. So a few years out of college, my girlfriend and I were living in a sort of large communal apartment with 5 other people, 2 bedrooms, 2 couches in the common area. I had just gotten a significant promotion at my job, and that situation was exceptionally below my means, but my GF was convinced that these were her people and they were all going to become great philosophy writers and poets by living together and sharing experiences. They were all unemployed or underemployed and experienced moochers, so I was very careful not to let them know I was saving large sums of money with the intent of moving out soon and taking my GF with me or not. One day the other couple had an argument about rent, and to try and keep them from coming to blows, my GF promised them that it'd cover it for them and showed them one of my pay stubs, which I guess they showed everyone else. I got home from work and walked right into an apartment meeting ambush where everyone else informed me that they wanted me to contribute more meaningfully and they'd put it to a vote before I got back. I told them that I was already paying for their food, that they kept guilting my GF into buying for them, topping up the apartment emergency fund instead of stealing from it like the rest of them, and many other things, and that I wasn't going to cover other people's rent as well. The next day, when I was at work, someone went into my room and destroyed my laptop, which was the only thing of value I owned at the time. I collected the few things I wanted to take, told my GF I was breaking up with her, and walked out. Edit. I just realized I'm effectively the bad guy from Rent. Well, Rent sucks. Edit 2. Thanks for the interest and support, everyone. I can give an answer, although it is developing at this stage. All throughout school I was a bit of a loser, didn't do well in class, and never really cared. I used to go out all the time with my friends, and would hang out with them all the time. After school I didn't do much other than waste time, until I found my wife and wanted to start being better for her. I did a 1-year software development course and then got a pretty shooty job making almost nothing in my country, South Africa. When my wife got pregnant, all my friends basically ghosted me as I wasn't going to be going out partying with them anymore. They wouldn't return my texts or even answer my calls. A few years down the line I landed a very high paying remote job, a 200k plus for a SF based company. The average salary for a software developer in South Africa is around $30k per year. My wife was very proud of me, I think, and posted a picture of me on her Facebook standing next to my new car that I had just bought. Not 20 minutes after she posted it, I started getting messages from some of my old friends saying that it had been a while and they wanted to catch up and really missed me. There was one guy I always had a soft spot for and decided that I would go have dinner with him and see how the last 4 years of his life treated him. We hadn't even ordered our food, yet when he dropped the bomb on me that he felt that I owed him a lot of money for always being there for me, and that I would be selfish to not give him some money as I had so much, I quietly just got up and left. I eventually changed my number and deactivated my social media accounts, but people still harass my wife and mother to try and get some money out of me. This doesn't even go into the absolute shoot I had coming from my dad's side of the family, who are basically hillbillies. Not exactly horror story, but I've always made more money than most of my friends. Some of them would hit me up for cash, but usually I only agreed to small amounts or said no. I did however have a very close friend who I really enjoyed the time we spent, but we liked to drink, so bars were our go-to hangout. I usually ended up paying for the entire night, to the point where he said he wasn't comfortable hanging out because he never had the money. But I genuinely did like just hanging, and he always bought the first round. That's respect. So, I knew this girl who was a sex worker, had known her for years, and we had even briefly dated before she got into that line of work. She was always really open about what she was doing and that she enjoyed it, which I believed, because this woman was a freak in a good way. In fact, one of the reasons things hadn't worked out was that she was way too kinky for me, and I'm pretty open-minded. She always explained it to me like this: I would be a total slut either way, so why not get paid for it and not have to work? Fair enough, I didn't question it. Fast forward like 10 years, and I had inherited a bunch of money. Not like obscenely wealthy, but enough to really change my lifestyle. And I still talk to my friend regularly, even though we live in different parts of the country. She was one of the few people who was there for me consistently through some really dark times, and I was there for her in the same way, and I really valued her friendship. She started talking about how she wasn't young anymore, and she wasn't happy anymore doing what she was doing, and wanted to change directions. You probably can guess where this was going. She had a plan that seemed pretty good. I was also in the midst of intentionally drinking myself to death, and I was pretty sure I was going to die soon. I came very close, so I didn't really care about money. I ended up giving her $10,000 that she needed to go back to school. Not a loan, just gave it to her. I don't know what she spent it on. Drugs probably, but she didn't go back to school. She abruptly cut off contact with me after 12 years, and that was that. Obviously I didn't die, although as I said I came extremely close. I still have money, so I'm not even mad about that. And she was legitimately a huge support in my life for a long time, when there was no expectation of her ever getting anything out of it, so I'm still grateful for that. I think her demons just got the best of her, and she's probably really ashamed or maybe even dead, but it was such a painful betrayal. My mom has this ugly football themed van. Ever since I was 10 we would go around in circles about how it will be mine one day, but I told her from the start it'll pass. I hate vans and football. Bought a different car and the van broke down after she put over 300k miles on it. I get my first income tax, which was almost 3k, and she tries to sell me the van for 2k. I tell her no, and she drops it to 1,000. Since I can easily afford it, I still refuse, and less than an hour later she sends me a picture of a 1,200 dog for sale with "This is what I want for my birthday. Hes in Kentucky. I'll send you the address." She wanted to use my money to get a dog, and was hoping to be sneaky and trick me into buying a broken ugly van to fund her multi-state trip to pick up her dream dog. She didn't speak to me for months after and still tries to sell me that pose for more than it was worth when it ran. I inherited my beloved grandma's house alongside with some other properties. As the house and the properties are near a very rapidly developing city, prices have skyrocketed and lead to me inheriting about $1.5 meters in value. That may sound awesome at first, but it truly isn't. The house is a very old brick house, built in the late 1700s, and the properties are so small and widely distributed I can't really sell them for a good price. As the house is a listed historical building, every little repair has to be done by state-approved professionals for restoration and conservation of old buildings, which basically doubles, if not even triples the costs. I rented it out, but the rent I get is barely enough to cover the costs of repairs, insurance, etc. I'm lucky if I get even by the end of the year. But as this house is where my family used to live for the last 4 generations before my dad bought the ranch and moved there with my mum, I want to keep it in the family as long as possible. Now, somehow, word has spread that I inherited a lot of money. I did my best to stop these rumors, but it didn't work out. I've never had many friends, but the ones I have are true quality friends. They will do everything for me, and I will do everything for them. After I got the house and the rumors spread, I got invitations to dinner in some really fancy restaurants. I was invited to sport events I don't even like sports and some other very costly activities. All these came from people who claimed to be my friends. Needless to say, they expected me to pay for everything. Yeah, I've got so much money. What do these $500 matter to you? It'll pay you back sometimes, etc. Were the common phrases I got to hear. The best one were, "You are way too young, 28 BTW, to have this kind of money, so just give it to us. You don't deserve to have so much money. You have never worked a day in your life. Been working at the power plant since I was an apprentice at 18. Worked my way up to deputy manager / shift supervisor while the guy this came from was unemployed as long as I can remember and lived from welfare. I have now learned who to trust and to spot telltale signs of vultures." Old friends would only want to meet on the condition that we go out to eat and that I pay for it. Got a $7,000 settlement from a car accident. I accidentally left the check on the corner table in the living room. My dad walks into my bedroom and asks if I can lend my mom any money. I work minimum wage retail and ask him how much does she need. He says how about half of that $7,000 check. It has been almost 8 years. I haven't seen any of that money back. I think you already know what I'm about to say, but you will probably never see any of that money back. When parents borrow money from children, I think in the back of their mind they sort of see it as payment for all the money they spent on you growing up. At least I think that's how they justify it. Edit. Sorry for the confusion, I shouldn't have wrote this in a way to make it seem like all parents feel this way. What's crazy is I grew up in a very poor family, and when my parents borrowed money they always tried to make sure and pay it back when they could, so why I worded it that way I don't know. I guess I was just focused on that one person's comment. I apologize. Not sure if it really fits, as we never actually received the money in the end and I'm not too clued in on the details, but anyway, about 10 years ago or so, my grandfather called my mother one day exclaiming that had finally netted in excess of £1 million worth of property, a big deal for my family. Of course he wasn't doing anything with it, he was always a frugal man, and remained that way until the day he died. As the years went on, his health deteriorated in more ways than one, progressing to the point where he needed to have full-time care and ultimately ended up being put in a home. Now we currently live in Australia. My family is mostly still in the UK. My aunt who still lives there was responsible for sorting out all of his needs. Time went on and sadly he ended up passing away. As all of this was happening, she was looking into his financial details and his will and whatnot. What was peculiar was that in his state of dementia, he had apparently at some point closed all of his bank accounts and withdrawn any money in cash. How? I don't know, but as a result of that, what with all of the costs of supplying care to him in his home and whatnot, the banks believed that we had hidden the money somewhere and refused to help. What seems to have actually happened is that someone, possibly even himself, who knows, influenced him to withdraw all the money, bought things he didn't need, that then didn't even turn up anyway, had repairs done on the house, that either didn't need to be done, or didn't actually get done anyway yet were still paid for, then variously distributed in other ways, until it was all gone. The only shred of a paper trail that we have is that we got word that his gardeners no longer live in the UK, seemingly up and left around the same time this all happened, and now live in the Canary Islands. Before the recession hit, my dad had a pretty lucrative small business and we lived comfortable middle class lives. He would often lend his family money, since most of his sisters didn't amount to much in their lives. They would never pay him back, and often hassle him to give them money, since he was so well off. After the recession hit, we took a big dive and still were able to live okay, but had to sell a lot, no more insurance, and basically lived paycheck to paycheck, while my dad worked 7 days a week to make ends meet. After all he's done over the years, not one of them would help when we needed it. One of my uncles has even been even more well off with a car dealership and refused to aid my father with a loan, even though my father always pays his debts regardless of if others do the same. None of his sisters have ever repaid a cent of his generosity. I have a lot of terrible stories about them through the years, and finally he's cut them all out of his life after almost losing my mom through divorce last year, partly BC of his horrid family and how they treated her, and nearly drinking himself to death the past 3 years. They are truly terrible, greedy people, and it's all taught me a lot about the kind of person I want to be and who I want to surround myself with. Friend of mine lost both parents in the span of about 4 months. They were pretty old, so it wasn't completely unexpected, but it still sucked for her. Anyway, when the first parent died, I went to the funeral to offer support. It's a small affair, few dozen people and most of them friends instead of family, and it's also where I found out that my friend's parents have been on minimal contact with their families because neither side approved of the marriage. Then the second parent dies 4 months later, and I go to funeral again, but this time there are well over 100 people there. It seemed like every aunt, uncle, nephew, and niece suddenly showed up. After the funeral, I'm waiting in the reception area before my friend and her brother come out to thank everybody for coming, and I overhear multiple people talking about how much they're hoping to get in the inheritance. My friend's parents didn't leave a will, so the entire inheritance automatically gets split 50/50 between her and her brother. I didn't see the drama firsthand, but I've heard stories from her much later about the whole ordeal. A few people were decent about it, but most of the family were absolutely horrid. They tried sucking up at first. When that didn't work, they got angry. One aunt apparently threatened to not let my friend see her nephew, even though she had seen that nephew maybe twice in 10 years. When my grandmother died, her will stipulated that everything was to be split 3 ways. A third to my mother, a third to my uncle, and a third to be split evenly between my sister and I. My uncle wanted to sell my grandmother's house immediately to get more money out of it, but I wanted to keep it for sentimental reasons. My parents gave me a bit of money, and I used all my inheritance to buy out my uncle's share of the house. I paid my parents back over the next few years, but the property became much more valuable. Over the following 10 years, while I lived in the house, property values in my city exploded. The house that I bought was also in a very desirable neighborhood and was worth well over double what I paid for it. It has continued to climb. When I paid out my uncle's share, the estimated value was around $300,000. Last year the neighbor's house, almost identical, sold for $945,000. Needless to say, my uncle has said multiple times that when I sell the house, he is legally entitled to more money out of it. That is bullshit. He is not getting another penny from me. I plan to live here for many more years. He will be long dead by the time I sell. People weren't begging, but we felt like they were jealous and envious and did not approve of our decision. Basically, my husband came into money because he had a number of severe permanent injuries from his prior job. So he got paid out a large sum and decided to stop working for a while. This was because we had been through some very serious illness. I was ill in personal circumstances which fricked us both up mentally, so we wanted to take the time to recover our mental health. And secondly, he needed to study to change careers because he was unable to work in his former career due to injuries. Many people, even our parents, disagree with him having even a few months off work to recuperate. This really shoots me up the wall. And there have been so many people that don't think we deserve the money and are envious of the house we were able to buy with it. Edit. Thanks for the upvotes. It means a lot to us to know that we aren't overreacting to the situation, and getting our lives back is so positive. When I was young, like 10, I won $100 on a Nevada pull tab ticket at the local country fair. It was in a curling rink where vendors had handmade crafts. When I cashed it, a lady who was selling knitted teapot cozies was like, "Oh, where are you going to spend all that?" Then she asked me to spend $15 on one of her cozies. I told her thanks, but I'm going to save it for a video game console, original Nintendo. She then called me a freaking selfish little ass and said her teapot cozy was much more valuable than a stupid video game. I was so nervous I just bought one. I gave it to my mom and she thought it was the most wonderful gesture, and it turned out that lady was right. The love I got from that cozy was much more valuable because my mom paid the difference for the Nintendo the next week. I won't necessarily call it begging, but more of a change in people's social demeanor. For example, me and my friends would all go to the movies, mall, or we would just go to a store to pick up essentials. Ever since my friends started getting tipped off that I had more money than them due to my clothing being a little more higher end and usually having the newer gadgets and whatnot, they usually would start asking me to pay for their stuff such as pet food, borrow money, etc. I never really thought much of it, but then when I started to realize this happened, after I started enjoying life a little more, I started to understand. My uncle would have been classified as working poor. A job, a wife, a kid, an apartment, but living paycheck to paycheck. They won the little lotto, and with another winner, my uncle got like $200k. They walked away from the apartment, bought the largest house in the poorest neighborhood, and their friends always seemed to need something. I remember as a kid, they often had friends living in the guest room. They bought 2 new cheap cars, and then come property tax time, they were broke, and once again working poor.